Okay, so the first basic startup for the Legend of Zelda Timeline should be this: The Legend of Zelda, Zelda 2, The Adventure Link, and A Link to the Past, which you can see I'm using the Game Boy Advance box art, most specifically the European one, just because it looks better. So right now there's no evidence required for any of this, Zelda 2 just taking place a few years later after The Legend of Zelda. A Link to the Past, no one's going to deny it's a prequel to The Legend of Zelda, at this point, obviously. And the simplicity of the timeline still stays the same, even when on the Game Boy in 1993, The Link's Awakening comes out. So Link's Awakening seems to be a sequel to A Link to the Past. The evidence? Well, you could just take a look at the manual, seriously. There's the manual, and there's of course also some in-game evidence, like for instance, if you take a look at the nightmares in Link's Awakening, yeah, that's what they call bosses. Like, okay, I got the boss key? No, I got the nightmares key. Head over to the nightmares lair, nightmare. Okay, so one of the final nightmares in Link's Awakening is Aghanim, in which you should know is exclusive only in A Link to the Past, and now Link's Awakening. So that should be a little seal in that Link's Awakening Link is from A Link to the Past. So then the Zelda timeline will see a drastic change when in 1998, of course, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time 64, of course, the three things just for, the fanciness, Okay, so Ocarina of Time was apparently the beginning of everything. The evidence? Well, there's plenty of evidence. Official statements, in-game stuff. Doesn't matter. I mean, who's going to argue that Ocarina of Time is not first? But 2 years after Zelda 64 comes its direct sequel. Majora's Mask. Yeah, I'm making this way more, than it needs to be. So, yeah, Majora's Mask was the direct sequel to Ocarina of Time. At the end of Ocarina of Time, Link gets sent back to his own time to relive his childhood before any of the stuff of Ocarina of Time happened, but he went to warn Zelda about Ganon, how he's going to crap everything up. So, then that leads on to Majora's Mask. Game Boy Color games, the Oracle of Seasons and the Oracle of the Ages. Okay, these two games seem most likely go between A Link to the Past and Link's Awakening, concerning the fact that in the secret ending of the connected Oracle games where you enter the passwords and such, Link sails off on a ship which is speculated to be the same ship as seen in the intro of Link's Awakening. There are certain things that go against this, but for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to say that Link to the Past, Link's Awakening, and the Oracle links are the same. In the end of Link to the Past, he restores the Triforce, and the Oracles, he comes to check on the Triforce, he gets teleported to different lands, and then he comes back home to Hyrule on the ship, then Link's Awakening, so... Okay, now moving on to Four Swords. Just like the Oracle games, they didn't have a certain spot that's obvious or weren't confirmed to go before or after anything. It seemingly didn't count but if it did, it most likely would have gone in the end. But if not, then it was just like something off to the side. But however, the change that Ocarina of Time had over the timeline started to kick into effect when The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker came out. This amazing game, which by the way is better than Ocarina of Time, is a sequel to Ocarina of Time. As you see in Ocarina of Time, where Link left back to his own time period and Hyrule, was all at peace and stuff. Then Ganon broke out of his seal and was causing a whole bunch of hell, and then the goddesses decided to flood Hyrule because there was no hero to stop him because he was gone. So Link showed up, stabbed Ganon in the forehead, and we move on to our next games. Four Swords Adventures 2004 GameCube to the right, Diminish Cap Game Boy Advance 2005 to the left. With these two games and Four Swords in between, they make up what is known as the Four Swords Saga. Some people believe that they go very first in the beginning before Ocarina of Time. I don't believe it at all, I just don't buy it. There are some people that believe that the Four Swords Saga have absolutely nothing to do with the overall timeline. So basically, the Minish Cap was in a way a reboot to the Legend of Zelda series. So I'll just finish up the final games and I'll give a placement for the saga. 2006 for both the GameCube and the Wii. By the way, the GameCube version is better. Twilight Princess. Twilight Princess is set about a century after the events of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. The evidence? Well, official statements. There's plenty of references from Twilight Princess to Ocarina of Time. And it can also fit in before A Link to the Past, considering the fact that in the end of Twilight Princess, the Master Sword was placed back in the Sacred Groove, which was the Lost Woods, and that's where it is in A Link to the Past. Okay, so moving on to those two DS games in 2007 and 2009, Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks, both sequels to Wind Waker. Okay, the evidence? You really deserve a massive pimp slap if you don't know that Phantom Hourglass is after Wind Waker. That's about as clear as Majora's Mask after Ocarina of Time. And I cannot believe that there are people that don't know where Spirit Tracks goes. I mean, come on. 3 great pieces of evidence. 100-year-old Nico, or over 100. Linebeck III, and Zelda referring to Tetra as her grandmother. So that states that Spirit Tracks takes place about a century after the events of Phantom Hourglass. Link and Tetra discover their new Hyrule, and this is their grandchildren doing this shit and stuff. So let's take a look at the Zelda game at late 2011. November 20, 2011 comes another start to the whole entire Zelda series. Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, taking the name as the first Zelda game to start everything. Nothing can go behind this game, not even the Four Swords Saga, which some people are I don't get that. I don't get that. The Legend of Zelda is usually made up of a few major components: Link, Zelda, Ganon, the Master Sword, and the Triforce, and I guess Hyrule, However, this game, coming before Ocarina of Time, only contains a few of those components. First off being, obviously, Link and Zelda. And he also has the Master Sword, which is right now the Skyward Sword. It'll turn to the Master Sword later on. Hyrule is being overrun by a bunch of pricks and faggots and stuff. The Triforce is another story, and apparently there seems to be a lack of Ganon. Okay, so being the first game in the series, you think that it's supposed to have all those components fit into it quite well. It sort of does, but except Ganon is replaced by that guy, Graham, the fag. So aside the Ganon Graham thing, Skyward Sword is the beginning to everything. Thus far, the timeline is complete. But this is where I believe where the Four Swords Saga goes. The reasons, well, mainly because in diminished cap, the Triforce is, seen as the Triumph Force, which is what it was known in Wind Waker. But there are people that believe that it goes after Twilight Princess and before A Link to the Past. So you can place the Four Swords Saga wherever you want as long as it makes sense. And also by this time, people seem to think that the NES games don't tie in with A Link to the Past, and they go on the adult timeline after Spirit Tracks. So if you want to believe that, that's okay. But I don't. But again, that's one of the game. The NES games are one of the games where you could just place wherever you think they might go. But I do think this is the most logical, and if you remember from last time I said, the 3D Zelda games, the Game Boy games, the NES games, and the Four Swords Saga. That's the groups of which these games are in. But as of 2011, this is what I think is the Zelda timeline, and until another game comes by, I'll just just put in wherever it's set to go. This is the same timeline, just with a different view, Look familiar? As of now, this is the correct split timeline for The Legend of Zelda. Yeah, it should. And this, once again, is the same timeline, but just with the links in it. Two things that, should come to notice. The link that represents Link's Awakening is replaced with one of the Game Boy Advance Link to the Past ones because, the Link's Awakening art is bad. Not as bad compared to the one in Zelda 2, because that is just pure shit. And you can see Skyward Sword Link is mirrored, so he'd be left-handed. I don't know. I just wanted to do that.